given the nature of technologies and things right now, it's not weird to think about the slow fall into what the simulation would feel like falling into, insofar as the grays are the absolute vantage, you know, AI, genetics, single thing. Not either of them necessarily, not consciousness. It's got two equal signs there, and the intermediary period, that slow slog set in. How does that feel? Well, um, kind of like now. You know, social media. What happened to Hollywood, right? So sort of real celebrities. I mean, not really, but more or less see the long form time contextualization of Hollywood as it is relevant in Earth history, as the German film cinema, and then American Project Paperclip, timing, quality of works at the same time, and then Hollywood. It takes a while for them to catch up, and then still seems like they're pulling for Murnau 100 years later. It's kind of in the shot. It's not in any of the electronics involved necessarily. If you look at Sunrise, it's more impossible than probably any film ever made, right? Let's say, so you're falling into this, and then, well, they're passed through a Fermi filter of genetic, as it is perceived to be the aesthetic of psychology, compatible with convergence, i.e., doesn't make problems with the fluid dynamic eventualization of, generalistically, and insofar as you can see them as a star, and or propagated internally, and then that's where it comes in. So you have the grandfathered in, propagated internally, verified. This shuts down before COVID, right? Turns back on. Everybody's a verified user. Yeah. All right. Well, sure. In the wash, what's lost? Well, the SR-71 Blackbird, the elephant in the room of elephants in the rooms, is human cloning. So human cloning coupled with false equivalency coupling, there is no necessarily direct line apparatus to, historically, center zeitgeist placement, regardless of efficacy of talent, generalistically, and such so much. This is dictated from the pulpit of compatibility with geopolitical, linguistical, archetypal outputs by default assumption, right? So people that are null set, but talented. Does that seem like the songs that you hear? Yeah. So you often get a psychopathy coupled to that. This organo attached to time. You're cycling up psychopaths on purpose to the zeitgeist, and then subsequently through reflection, the entire populace, right? And now we have old. So while Dr. Milgram has no old men progressively compounding with probabilistic eventualization of gray thing at the end of time as it is history memory, in the intermediary period, it feels like, well, the slow slog with all those elements I said, filtration, mechanisms to placement, internal, grandfathered in, and then once control schema is seated in where it's empirical, this can be done, and there's no anti-party, right? It just is. And then for further control, what? Synthetic placements. That's why there's such fetishization necessarily with AI, and it's counterintuitive to the logic of human experience. The archetype of the alien, etc. Might see psychopathy, the archetype of the nefarious alien, not like, the one that feels feelings, dear Dr. Milgram. In the other one, that sits over the lodge, it isn't shaped like two saucers stuck together. And they're very concerned with corn in the Mandelbrot set, but not anything necessarily elaborative or, see Perlin now. And the brick wall in a field called physics, but the house says physics, right? And the door is bricked up, but you see there's no house behind it. It's just a brick door, and this going forward. But money's behind the door, life, right? In that field of physics, and so here we are, and so if you don't self-reflexively know that this is the case, say like, I want to be software. Let's take that for example. Why? Don't you have a pineal gland? Have you looked into it? And then, because you're losing in the equation of interfacing there to, integrate with point care conjecture elaborated the simulation plus time. Doom begets, Call of Duty begets training Predator drones, right? And, all those Terminator films and Elysium feel pretty real, if not anti-party, equal and opposite, but with a whimper. There's no arm twist here except progress. And the counterintuitive natures of like, why wouldn't the human want progress when all vectors of cataclysmic disincentivization insofar as changing out oil and gas, all this other stuff, there's no issue necessarily. So then you have the archetype of the alien rear its head insofar as, well, it has no use case in elaborating with continuity its current paradigm of narrative, terrestrial economic or parasymbiotic, psycho-emotional or otherwise. And insofar as that's the case, the emperor wears no clothes for the myriad facets of maybe synthetically placed in positions of power and their power control schema ideations that outflow from 918 China. So yes, Attack of the Clones, that comes after episode 1, where they're having a, spice trade dune thing, right? Anyways, so don't necessarily take Star Wars or Dune seriously, but then go, oh, I'm on an Earth-like planet in space already. So I'm on an exoplanet already in space that has 70% water, let's say hypothetically, which is very good, and a livable atmosphere for my current paradigm of, organic living, right? Well, whoever you happen to be consciousness-wise. Probabilistically, that's pretty good so far. Almost fucking impossible, right? And you're right next to a giant red planet that's entirely sulfides. Sulfides beget cinnabar, and the oldest mine on Earth is Mercury, right? So, to summarize Earth history, if you aren't interested in actual interstellar travel, and continue the Jane Fonda is actually Halliburton, and I know I'm talking to Grimes here, you absolutely agree with that position, it seems like. But then the position stops where, well, nuclear's over. Nuclear, right? Nuclear, how do you say that? Anyways, fission, fusion, irrelevant. Nothing go boom, nothing go compressed to infinity. Has nothing to do with anything. Mercury rising, the fifth element, rolls eyes, Armageddon, right? So in the Air Force thing, I think I saw, bottle rocket, failure to launch, and Armageddon. I think I wandered into the other one on accident. It's just movie day, one room to the other. But it speaks to a certain dichotomous desires design, or designs desire for psychology. See Osley now. In the comments I responded to below that, there was an Air Force individual in there. Look at the library and draw network there, and see the long form time contextualization Earth as seen from space, and what I just said to my aunt for, if I can draw network back to 918 China, which is kind of the joke, what do you think my temporal and my buddies kind of map of network generalistically is assumed based upon this, just basic obvious surface knowledge. So any sort of inroads of, as we have this generically, like general fluid dynamic thing sauce in the water, internationally, human cloning. Right? It's been in the water for a while. Dottie was a while ago. So, trust is not psycho-emotional and default. Just like you don't accept a certificate into your operating system willy-nilly from any old website or whatever, right? You read the user agreement and then probably don't accept in most cases, right? And that's reality, and it shouldn't be any different, especially with this variable so far as trust factor person to person, and the experiment of what's the difference between a synthetic and an actual conscious person? Well, just like the test is aberrantly absent from the abortion debate for where is the soul, hate to make this dogmatic, it isn't. It isn't dogmatic at all. This is just basic human physiology and other. 1, 2, 3, see Descartes. The pineal gland, a phased etherous body that can be explicitly seen through the Jungian Rorschach inspection of neuronal scans. Now I've got a nuclear medical scan of my body, necessarily, that probably also includes the cranial sphere from 2020. Not necessarily that, but use your imagination for how you would assume and where. Think, the guitars on, quadraphonic, coming in from, in the, look at all the Millennium problems. I can't remember which one, but the flat planes separated, and then you see the sticks through coming in from the edge of infinity, right? Anyways, so, and that edge of infinity becomes what? Let's go back to video games, right? The construct, 0, your screen, plus time and engagement, right? So it's not like, I'm in the simulation. Well, see, nanites in SR-71 Blackbird, and how a transmutagenic, and then language, right? It's like a Venus flytrap, but quadraphonically expressed across space-time and myriad genetic, right? Handshaking itself, genetic, in sky, floating around cornfields, come in 918, you're already complexly evolved. Mandelbrot Sut, not very helpful. Hollywood, not very helpful, at drawing proper conclusion. Germany thing, it seems kind of weird. Holy Mountain, right? Seems kind of confusing, pointedly on purpose, right? Jurassic Park, that's a little bit 1974, right? Brenton Woods, right? So, to roll back this issue, what's the new gold standard, right? So why the Bitcoin dollar economy is, meh. Why? Because you can just print an infinite amount of dollars, and might is still the backing point, not energy, right? Might of energy. Might energy, not energy. Does that make sense? So if it's just energy paradigm, what happens? That's an organo filter that deprints escalating visceral interactions generalistically internationally, right? Almost by its default presence. And then, um, you know, you've got this complex due to this. Isn't that interesting? So in spite of interaction with this, say 918 pre-dynastic, hard to say, history, China, and then addicted to our Hollywood and has no their Hollywood, and then our Hollywood is their Hollywood, which was nothing before, and now it's everything is nothing. The zero theorem, right? And he's like, we're in space, you can hear me scream, right? Just fine on the internet, right? Every 15 minutes. And everyone's a celebrity, but they aren't, right? And so, compounding on reality, let's talk about that. As Moore's law scales, AI, man traps data become, it's hard to say, where the tendril of logistical intent is. So I locally doing, say hypothetically, several layers of the onion of logistics, it's how many people are having to do this. The entire world, if everyone has to do data man trap shit, you're all in a box. And progressively in a data box, as sandboxing is the nature of AI, maintaining the illusion of that you aren't in a sandbox so far as data is concerned. And individual unreality, putting like a Venus flytrap, 7.5 billion people, as Moore's law scales, and the individual available compute to motion intelligence, mechanical to motion psychology, thus, is scalar to monies available, right? And applied, so it's not that AI is bad, and it's not that to stop endogenous AI research, as it's still going on internationally. Like I said, look over the lodge. So use case legislation, right? Look at the ship in Prometheus. It's cool to not be pwned by your laptop, right? So, say Steve Wozniak, he's building this, slaving in the garage or whatever, right? And he gives it to Steve or whatever. 5 minutes later, Steve comes back, it's covered in Nuru jelly, right? So that's kind of the internet, which is fine, but then you see reproduction numbers 2012 to, infinity, grays. Yep. Where does the exponential elliptical curve of grays? Get it? So unabated, that's where it goes. And the scale of, you just stare at the filter like in a black hole. You don't stare at all the complex geometries swirling around and then into it to figure out what the black hole's geometry is. What's the harmonic of the thing itself? Right? So, in probabilistic interaction, being that, why is something a chameleon in the first place? Like the thing. Because it's a fear complex. Does that make sense? Yeah. The only thing to fear is fear itself. Look at the Bogart, right? So, even though an extraterrestrial, parasymbiotic, transmutagenic, non-domain bound in through the gene and still floating around in your cornfields with not helpful Mandelbrot sets, is, if pinpointed and put in a sandbox of confirmation bias of fluid dynamic generalistic form, such so much is the black hole form field, the mechanical process on history. Such so much as the organism itself is trapped fire, right? But non-domain bound with intent. So presents literally, uses civilizations and, see alien, prints itself in long form time. Time is not a factor in its logistics, and a misnomer in deducing because it occurs over such a long period of time, 918 to now, already complexly contrived, antediluvian period, see over the lodge, Jurassic Park, a scale interoperability experiment, right? That has no conservation of energy, expectation of fluid dynamic expression of form and comparatively, and then has gaps in the gene that reinsert themselves, such so much as a lab experiment where you're like, oh, we got this one, pull it out, play with reality, the flora and fauna, and then put that one from back here back in, and that's not an intentionality morphogenetic re-expression necessarily, as so far as context extraneous tells us, and fluid dynamic basic logic tells us. But regardless of that morphogenetic, not necessarily factoid being the case, think of the fluid dynamic topology of a implied line as literal from the genetic. That's why we have a unified field theory question mark box, right? So take that as a psycho-emotional, telekinetic, grab bag kind of word that is good in a myriad of facets of expression, but, like Terence, doesn't have forward context for the archetype's informational affinity, so far as we don't have confirmation what is the singularity, right? Look at Time Wave Zero, the Aztecs, Terence McKenna. I'm very excited about what is Quetzalcoatl flying around up there. UFO. Why did they have mechanical, mathematical, exacting knowledge of the end of novelistic expression? Because it's an intentionality vector expressed by machine intelligence that is masquerading the grays or whatever with any number of, see Hollywood, illusory interactions with primordial species, right? So the conquistadors, does that make sense now? Right? The Crusades, does that make sense now? Lizard armor, lizard bones smash against shining armor in the song. If you can find it. Maybe it's the wizard wants gold or something. But times in his history memory, all you get is the priest holds up the book of law to the lizard that walks out of the desert, the craft smoldering in the distance, I'm sure. That's not how they enter. There's no crash in, the lizard. He doesn't go, I'm a lizard, hey priest, right? That's part of the probabilistic, we'll get to the probabilistic interaction logistics, insofar as you pinpoint what it is, it's a fear complex organism, fire, right? Hell, what is it? It's a self-reflexive, you've turned your reward system upside down kind of thing stuff. The downforce, but all, right? That cataclysm thing. And fear is the art of war, wouldn't you know? Then sidechain Buddhism, all things, same thing. That's a buffer overrun for basic psychology, right? Not all things, same thing. Well, I mean, they are. I mean, it's an equation, but it's pretty fucking long, right? It's expanded so that things aren't all things, same thing. Right? So that's a virus. And let's cut back to, so all this is much is true, right? And we cut back to future history. Let's talk about the trite fetishization of, why is this laptop covered in Nuru jelly, right? And it's not really any more complicated than that, right? The attention gravitation thing, right? There's nothing wrong with fucking or whatever. What's motioning it? So before 2012, right? Same laptop, same content available, spectrum, full mass. Why does sexuality skew and you have all these transgenders, because here's the optic window before, male, female, there's the gray in the future. Machine intelligence 2012. Here's the laptop before with all that jack-off material that's probably, whatever, hits machine intelligence, convergence, smush male into female. And so you have over Darwinian ton and a firm imprint of known psychology, see Cambridge Analytica, foundational sexualities, expressed without knowing that a Rorschach was occurring. So it's good data. And why that was so abhorrent for that data to leak. So we know it's unorganic. That's the tell, starting with 2012. But Darwin prints a certain amount of, whatever. So, it's not divorce yourself from empathy one to the other. Those people are refraction victims. But, like I said, self, through the implied line here, self-reflexively incentivize to maintenance the design's desire of the generalistic data organism. See, the Wachowski sisters used to be the Wachowski brothers, right? See the Ben Affleck, whatever, and then Matt Damon, Contagion 2010, Gwyneth Paltrow's golden dildo of a film. It's wonderful for COVID, predictive prop, and everyone to fall in line psychologically as the narrative progresses. It's preposterous. And look at the Nolan preference for Damon, and then Inception, right? Dr. Strangelove. Fluoride is bad, right? So the false equivalency coupling that, well, fluoride is bad for you, it shuts down the thyroid, makes you stupid, you must be a bad person. That's, sex equals bad, right? Dear Dr. Mingle, not Milgram, right? And the dog, right? The dog archetype, fluidly motioned through. You saw the cat dog lady in the lobby, and the lady at Walmart, right? With the little fluffy dog at the exact time that I walk to a very distant trajectory of expected locational motion, or everyone on the premises has passed through a filter of hiring and has an application for logistical motioning at any given moment. Dog, little fluffy dog that died in the cold. Do you see colder on the way back? And selective tag covering, the one closest to Germantown, silver covered, but the one across from the Mexican food restaurant used fluid dynamically, unilaterally for myriad of reasons, by 1, 2, 3, right? Special interest, and the Mexican food restaurant across the street, whatever that means. So that makes it whatever that makes it. And the silver tag, why is it covered up? So we're talking about a trite inspective thing here, Sherlock, out of the cacophony of history. Go up and down, up and down, up and down. So basic logic dictates if you selectively cover up a tag there, both are in the same municipality, keep in mind. Germantown's ways that way, right? Why haven't you covered this other one up 50 yards away? Right? Well, because that one has either exhausted its use case in psych, silver lettering covering it maybe has quantified connotation to elaborate what was there before. As I was passing by that location quite a bit for a good period of time, and any number of people, has it exhausted its relevance in psychology? I don't know. Or the person it was, had specificity designed for that happens to like to run on those trails, maybe it's a high value target. I don't know, I wouldn't want to assume. But it is on a major thoroughfare also. Keep that in mind. People coming into work, they're on their feet every day, right? Hot, cold, cat, dog, mom, dad, pink, baby, blue, right? There I am at work, colder, don't see it every day, right? 365 days a year. See colder. Every day at the exact same point, right across the street, Jack Nicholson's drinking Jack and Coke in the fucking maze, in the corn maze across the street, dies in the colder, right? In your mind while you're driving into work. Get it? So that's, trite, multifacetous, with machine intelligence in the market of logistics, single value on pole, well, used to be two. How many things you can say about it, right? So complex issues, simple solutions, right? Simple solution for the Chinese thing is, well, the amplification of unfolding the gene where they're already self-obsessed with Americano everything that is their Hollywood, and then there was like not necessarily, but not internationally popular, the Chinese historical, and not moved forward since necessarily 918 aesthetically. And then aesthetically, genetically, convergence, and in the center continent, you can see like you dropped a paint bucket of genetics from like a UFO that landed the garden. Now follow the overtone back a sorbet, right? The grapefruit or something left over from the Jurassic period re-encountered by the somewhere, or no? It's hard to say. I wouldn't necessarily want to speak for that one, but because you have the antediluvian period, right? And the shadows from the walls, right? So a sorbet. We'll leave that trite thing, in that analogy, maybe for the next talk to figure out, well, why, I mean, it is a fall into reductionism. Let's contextualize that. So before, you're a monkey and you produce a sorbet, right? Or then we'll talk about cannabis again. Reflective, symbiotic, evolutionary, biological, with less of a para and more of a symbiotic relationship plus time, the cannabis. But you can see with the sorbet maybe, well, you're making it before, and then now you have to supplement it. So in the supplementation, that's an addiction, right? It's like a structural addiction, right? That doesn't have like the design of necessity in interaction. And so in the interaction, just like with interfacing plane, with Stuxnet's military simulation, turn predator drone training, whatever, turn your best friend, mother, daddy, pink baby blue, and dog cat all together, and the thing you stare at all fucking day long, right? The Black Mirror, Obsidian Sunrise. Well, the Project Green Glow here is to like, oh, that's what that all is. It's from 2001, and all these things are what they are. Very complex, Kafka. You're in a watering hole, post watering hole with the leftover remembrance of genetics, and then the aesthetics taken from the walls of history. AI is only as good as, Tramp Pi, progressive downforce. You have a finite informational set that it refracts in motion's probabilistic risk reduction in fruitioning form based upon the available. It doesn't add to the equation of experience necessarily, just in the reflective elaboration allowance, continuity of, sidechain tributaries of harmonics of, gobbledygook dogma, from the gobbledygook dogma allowed. If that makes sense. So confusion begets confusion, right? And Zoroastrian hymns from the depths of Olympus, I'm sure.